Athens. This is a red letter day because Jane is back with us. I'm Crone and she's Motomouth. And you can imagine how crippled I've been without her on the show. I've just been sitting here trying to think of words and
oh dear.
And I even use you for my hearing aid. And
oh, I'm sorry I put you through such a trauma.
Well, tell us something funny that happened in the hospital.
No, nothing really funny happened in the hospital. Creepy. It was creepy. The whole thing was creepy. I had an operation on my eye for a condition called a macular pucker. And I won't go into all that, but everybody...
Pucker is P.
Pucker. Mm-hmm. As in pucker up. Macular pucker. And it entailed removing a growth from the inside of my eye. Okay, so I naively think that I'll be knocked out, you know? I'll be oblivious and then I'll wake up. Oh no, didn't work like that. You get that twilight sleep kind of thing. So you're awake, but you're not awake. But I could see everything. And I saw the needle come into my eye. That was the weirdest thing. Creepiest. I never want to have that. I told him if he ever did that again, if I ever had to have that again, he would have to totally knock me out. I could never do it again.
Take your eye out.
Whatever. But I am never going to have be awake watching somebody with a needle.
Scare people. I mean, it wasn't really painful.
Oh no, I didn't feel a thing. It's just the fact that I could see that needle in my eye, and I knew it was in my eye, was the creepy part. Other than that, it didn't hurt at all. Nothing hurt. He says you don't have nerves like that in your eye, so you don't feel anything. I was so woozy, and because it's 85 miles up there to the doctor's office and everything, we spent the night in a hotel in Columbus, and we go back to the hotel, and I just instantly went to bed and went to sleep. You know, I was just done in by all that, whatever happened, and the anesthesia and everything. So my son went to the casino while I was asleep.
Uh-oh.
And when I woke up, he was gone, and I didn't think anything of it because I figured he'd go somewhere, go get something to eat, or whatever. So I didn't think anything of it. So I turned the TV on, and I was just kind of laying there, all propped up on the pillows, and I heard somebody come down the hall, and I figured it was him. He came in. He had this awful look on his face. I said, "What happened?" He said, "I went to the casino, and I didn't really win." He didn't really win. Oh. I said, "Well, did you really lose?" He said, "Well, no, not really bad." But he said, "I'm used to winning, and I didn't really win." So, well, maybe you have to stay away from the casino in Columbus.
Oh, wow.
So that was funny. But, everything went pretty well. And the next morning, I had to be at the doctor's office at 7:30 in the morning. I don't even get up at 7:30, let alone, go to a doctor. So I had to get up, and we had to have breakfast and everything. We had to be up there at 7:30. And I had a patch, on my eye. And he took that off and said, "Well, okay, you're fine." So we came back to Athens, and no problems. I mean, I had to put drops in the eye, of course, as
You've
you
been
always
away
do.
a long time from the show.
Mm-hmm. Well, I couldn't drive for almost 3 weeks. Now I'm driving, but I still have a little bit of blurriness in my left eye, but it's not enough. I mean, I can see perfectly well, just as well as I ever could. It's just that kind of around the edges, I see a little blurriness on the left side. So I had to wait until I could see.
And that's from a new cataract, right?
Yeah, the pucker operation caused I had this teeny tiny little cataract. Everybody would tell me I had it. They said, "Oh, but it's nothing." Well, the cataract, or the macular pucker operation caused the cataract to grow for whatever reason. And I find out that's not unusual. My friend's husband had a detached retina, and after he had the operation for that, he had a cataract. And somebody else told me about something similar. So, There you go. I mean, if it's not one thing, it's another.
Well, I'm sure that you haven't been following Kaleidoscope because Jane doesn't watch Kaleidoscope.
I can't stand to see myself on TV.
Well,
I hate
you
it.
weren't on those 3
That's
weeks.
true. I
was
should
on.
have watched
still
you.
didn't, I know, and you
I'll
missed,
go back and watch the back episodes.
you missed the big grotesque introduction that I did.
Grotesque.
Yes, grotesque.
Huh.
Now
I know.
we'll play that on Halloween.
Oh,
And you
okay.
can see it. I was willing to make fun of myself, and I wasn't that sure about Jane being willing to make fun of herself, so I went ahead and did it before she came back. But since you've been gone, let's see, some things have happened. The A News sold
Oh, really?
to, oh really? You don't know that?
No, I didn't know that.
They sold to a Republican fundraiser.
Are you serious? The A News?
Well, it's the same one that owns the Athens Messenger now. So,
Oh.
so I don't know if they're going to endorse the same people.
Not
or,
a new Republican, the same old one.
But I must say the Messenger's not turned bad since the transaction, so maybe this guy will keep his paws off the paper.
Well, let's hope, because the A News.
Oh, I know the A News is Athens. I mean,
It
it's
really
really.
And if he wants to keep the readership and keep, the papers being distributed, he better leave it alone. That's all I have to say.
Well, something else had happened, but I think it happened before you left. On July the 14th, students for concealed carry-on at Ohio State University filed a lawsuit against OSU seeking permission to carry concealed weapons.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
Can you imagine
Oh, I can imagine.
these students carrying weapons on campus?
No. I mean, I can imagine, but I don't want to.
Like what you see.
Thanks anyway, I don't want to. I think it's horrible. Well, there's that whole thing going on with Kroger now, too. You know about that?
No.
People are protesting that Kroger.
Oh, yes, I know. I mentioned that. I did cover that.
It's still going on.
And I
keep
called them
thinking
and
this.
asked them what would happen, if somebody came in with a gun, and he said, well, I don't know. And I said, so you don't know what to do? And he said, well, call our head office. And so.
Well, I suppose they can't violate state law. In other words, if state law says that concealed carry is allowed, I don't think they can then say.
Well, evidently someone wrote that it's still okay for a business owner to limit, make rules about that.
So on private property, you can say, like in my house, I can say, don't come in here with any kind of weapon.
Well, the library does that,
Well, good for them.
and CASA does that, and someone new I saw the other day did that. But you heard what happened at Walmart. I think it was Cincinnati.
Yeah, I don't know where, somewhere in Ohio.
A person, they sell air rifles, I guess, and he had one of the air rifles that he picked up that they sell, and he got shot to death.
I know. Like a beat
Everybody's
gun.
getting trigger happy these days, except the local police.
Thanks.
Except the local police, and they had a Hail Mary Good Charlie something. You read about that and saw it on the front page of the paper, that the police served barbecue to the students at OU and tried to make sure that no animosity was building up. But I have heard that we are very lucky for the police force we have.
I'm sure that's
And
true.
for the police chief we have. So, and the things that come out on the internet every single day, a new atrocity every day.
I don't know what's up with these policemen, because they're shooting unarmed. It's like, okay, I get it. If the guy's a drug dealer and you're trying to get in his house and he's shooting you, well, I get it, you'd shoot back. But these are not, that's not the case. I saw some guy the other day, he was in a car with his girlfriend and her 2 kids were in the back seat. And they told the guy to get out of the car and he said, I don't want to get out. I don't know if there was something wrong with him or whatever.
He was afraid, I think, of getting shot.
So they took a hammer and smashed the car window and drug him out of there. What's that all about? They had no cause that I could see for any kind of suspicion. I mean, it's
the big
scary.
deal. The big deal was that they didn't have their seatbelts on.
Yeah. So for
Has
that,
anyone out there ever driven without their seatbelts?
So for that, they broke the woman's car windows, scared her kids to death,
Laced her,
tasered.
Yeah, tasered her.
I mean, here's what I think. And you've worked in prisons too, and so have I. And I think that there's 2 kinds of people who get into these positions. The ones that want to help people and the ones that want to hurt people. I think you give these boys all these toys, and some of them are going to play with them. And you see that in the prisons as well. You see COs, correction officers, that are wonderful, and they work with people, and they try to do their best. Then you see others that are just the opposite. So I think they're going to have to start psychologically testing these people so that they don't get the ones in there that want to hurt somebody. Because there are people out there that want to hurt somebody. They've got all this stuff. He's got a taser. He's got a big old hammer he can spec. He's been dying to do that guy probably. So here's his chance.
They call them sadists.
So I think probably one of the things that we need in this country is a better form of screening for people. I think you should have to have a license to be a police officer.
And better training. You know, we had David Malawista on not too long ago, and he talked about the training, intensive training that our local officers have been through and some in neighboring communities. And I don't know, there's a big difference.
I think so. And so, you know, if you're a police officer and your goal in being a police officer is to help people, good for you. I'm all for you. And I know that you will never shoot anybody unless you absolutely have to save your own life. If you're not that kind of a police officer and you've got all this stuff and you've been dying to use it on somebody, try to control yourself. That's what I say. Because this is unnecessary and ridiculously frightening. Those poor kids were having hysterics, of course, in the backseat. Well, why would you do that?
Thank goodness one of the little boys had a video camera and caught that.
His cell phone, on his cell phone. So anyhow, you know, this is something I think we're going to be struggling with for quite some time, because I think we haven't had the right kinds of screening devices for people who want, you know, there's crazies that just want to wear a uniform. In my hometown, there was some guy, and this is what, 30, 40 years ago, some guy got picked up. He had bought a full uniform, police uniform, and he was driving around in his car, and he had one of those little thingies, you know, that you can put on the roof of the car, the little light, and pulling women, of course women, over. And if he could get them to get out of the car, in case he barred the door, you know. So there's something, I don't know, about having a uniform, having authority, having control, that some people don't handle very well, I would say.
You know, there was a famous experiment in, I don't know if it was actually in a prison, but with a number of people that were divided in half, and half were going to role play prisoners, and the other half were going to role play officers in a prison kind of situation. And as they went on, they finally had to cancel the experiment because the officers started acting so abusive towards the prisoners. And these were just run-of-the-mill people. There's something about a situation
Power.
that can pull out unfortunate things from people.
A little power is a dangerous thing, or can be. Not always, but it can be.
Now we have two little shorts. One is a precious little thing. I had to pull it out of the Mothman show that was shown recently.
Oh, the Mothman. Is
Yeah.
he back now? I mean, I haven't heard anything about him for a
Well,
while.
you will see. Well, we had a whole hour of Mothman on one of our platforms,
Oh, really?
and but I pulled out a minute and a half of a precious little picture, and we're going to go right into the next one, which is right after a car wreck on East State Street. I was coming out of Walmart, and there was this wreck that had just happened, and you'll notice there's about 7 girls that were in one vehicle and one man in another one, and it was the man that had the hood all bent up. But anyway,
And the 7 girls. That's funny already.
we'll go to that now, and then we'll come back and tell you about Drew Evarts. And now for Drew Evarts, expert extraordinaire on grammar.
And I'm especially excited because for many years I was an English teacher. So I find grammar to be fascinating.
All
We'll
right.
see how other people feel. I hope you like it.
Take it away, Drew. Well, we welcome back to Kaleidoscope this week Drew Evarts, who used to have a grammar program on the old public access. It was a call-in show, right?
Yes.
Uh-huh. And we may get back to call-in shows because we have the equipment to do it now, but I didn't like to do call-in shows.
Well, really.
Once I got a message, I said, hello, and he said, get off the screen. And I said, thank you. So, and Drew has been a professor of journalism for
35 years.
35 years. And you were led to study grammar because of errors in your students' papers?
Well, errors everywhere.
Everywhere.
You really see them everywhere. So, and then I developed a book, a precision language, about that, and the whole back third of it is about easily confused words such as further and farther and that sort of thing, because people don't really know which one to use. And then they have to brush up, and it's something that they can look up if you have it in the back of the book.
So you authored that book?
Yes.
And you follow famous publications to check on their grammar, and these are publications that are already out and showing themselves,
Yes,
right?
Well, we have a lot of good examples right here in Athens. For instance, the college bookstore paid how many $1,000 for their nice sign, and it's spelled, bookstore spelled as 2 words. And I would think if you were investing in something huge, you would possibly look up how to spell the word. And then in the grocery store, if you go through the, if you go through any checkout, not just the 15-item one, but if you go through any checkout and use your credit card, after you swipe the card, the little message will come up saying, waiting on the cashier. In other words, the cashier has to do something before you can go further with the transaction. And they're not waiting on the cashier, the poor thing. She would be all bent out of shape if they were. They're waiting for the cashier. And actually, I did find one the other day that the swiping machine says for instead of on. But the most irritating one in the grocery store is the 15-item limitation, because many of them say 15 items or less, and almost all of them say that. And if it's something you can count, it should be fewer. And I don't think they use less just to have one less letter to put up there. They just don't know the difference between less and future. And you'll find that sign all over the country, 15 items or less.
Well, I know I got a video shot of, let's see, what is that new restaurant near 33? Anyway, one day they had this huge sign up, pancakes.
Well, I'm afraid that the person who put the no parking signs at the end of my driveway, because I live on the campus and people are very tempted to park in my driveway to run into the music building or the health center because they won't get a $25 fine in my driveway. And they know they're just going to be gone a few minutes, but I've missed a couple planes because of this. But anyway, I have because there are 2 lanes to the driveway, there are great big letters about a foot high painted on the blacktop that says no parking. But one of them actually says no park nig. If you can believe it, it was there 3 years before I noticed it. And then somebody else noticed it and told me. So when you think something is a certain way, you see it that way ordinarily.
Tell me about living room.
Well, whether it's 1 word or so, well, I think it's 2 words.
That's
believe,
2 words.
but I don't go too far from a dictionary because things do change in different times, and I look things up. I'm surprised, frankly, since now it's out of business, I can tell this tale. I used to work at Scripps Howard News Service in Washington, D.C. on academic vacations. In August, that was between the end of summer school and the beginning of the fall quarter. And then in December, since we had the 6-week long Christmas break, and people were very eager to spend their vacation time before losing it, because Scripps is one of those companies, if you don't use it, you lose it. And if it
Uh-huh.
wasn't used up by December 31st, too bad. So I went there, and I was surprised how many people on the news desk don't look at the style book or the dictionary very often, but I do if I have the slightest doubt. I think it's a very good habit.
Uh-huh.
So we can,
Now, granddaughter is one word, is that right?
oh, yes. Mhm.
Yes. But living room is 2 words.
Yes. But don't test me too much because I might have to go look it up. Because you do
Where's your
forget.
dictionary? We don't have a dictionary here because these guys use the
The computer.
Wikipedia or
Yeah,
whatever.
the Wikipedia. Yeah, I realize that.
So you were telling me about, well, you haven't told any stories about the A News or the Messenger.
Well, there was an interesting headline in the Messenger just the other day that had a wrong verb. It had a plural verb with a singular subject, but those mistakes are made at the desk when they are in a hurry, and sometimes it's because the word was want, and subject was definitely singular. So, but probably the S didn't fit well, and so the person just dropped it off. And you never know because sometimes they're done at a very frantic time. But the only big paper, I do a lot of clippings, and the only big paper I've discovered a mistake in was the New York Times when they were showing at results of the drought one year, not this present drought. We have more droughts, but they showed a combine and a man on the seat, and it said that he was baling wheat or baling hay rather, BAILING, and of course that's the kind of bailing to get somebody out of jail. Bailing hay would be BALING, but.
And that's the New York Times.
Yeah, but they're very good ordinarily. They don't make
Have
many
a big
mistakes.
paper for
Yes, right. But it's very difficult for people not to see what they know should be there instead of what's there. And I write a lot of things. I've done newsletters. I've edited books and journals and so on. And I like for somebody to read after me because it's very easy to see what you think is there and should be there instead of what is. So I'm all for multiple proofreaders if you can get them and if they pay attention.
Well, I've read recently that when people read a word, they read the beginning and the end of the word, and they can read the word.
Oh, really?
But they can also make errors.
Yeah, I suppose. Another amusing mistake we had in one of the restaurants in Athens that's now closed. This is in the era of the Dan Quayle vice presidency, with this big, long torture that he undertook because he couldn't spell potatoes, on the TV, and that was a big joke and only a legacy that he has for his 4 years in office. But
Okay, remind us how to spell potatoes.
but there was a restaurant that had it's a singular potato soup with an E on it. It looked like you're going to cook up some kind of toes in there. But
Well, there's a lot to keep you amused, that's for sure.
oh yes, well, but sometimes we have to understand that these are the results of typographical errors. And by the way, on a newspaper, the error can be made at the editing desk, but it's the reporter's name that's on the story, so he usually gets the blame. And then some of the things that are just people just don't really know. They either never learned or they forgot. For instance, the word everyone is a surprise, surprise singular. But you think everyone means a group. but it isn't. It's a singular word, and so if you're instructing your chorus to bring their music to the next rehearsal, you would say everyone should bring his or her music to the rehearsal, because you're referring to a
His
common,
or her, that's difficult.
well, one way you can get around that, yes, because sometimes it also makes possibly 3 times a personal pronoun of that sort is needed in a sentence, but you can help yourself out there by saying, make your subject in the plural. A chorus member should bring their music to the next rehearsal. And that isn't a big deal in that sentence because it is just one time. But if you say every chorus member who has music should bring his or her music to the chorus, and then we will return it to him or her at the end of the thing. And if he or she wishes. So that's why if you have more than one instance of a personal pronoun referring to a singular subject, you should try to reword the sentence. That's the best solution to that.
Well, for a while they were going to come up with a word to include he and she, or...
Yeah, but they haven't gotten there yet.
What is it?
They haven't gotten to it yet.
And, seems like they tried, or maybe a couple of feminist publications.
Well, that is how the word aren't became acceptable with a singular subject. For instance, it was to keep people from saying ain't, because if you were just using the word I, for instance, and say, I ain't had dinner yet, you know, and then if somebody wants to say that, if it's a question, for instance, and you would say, instead of ain't, we'd say, aren't I going to have dinner by 5 o'clock?
Yeah,
and,
that's an anti.
And so it's taking a plural verb and making it legitimate to use with a singular subject. And I remember when that happened because I was in grade school, so that would be in the 30s, early 40s, something like that, that it gradually became acceptable. And
now what became acceptable?
To use aren't with I. If it's a question or just some other way that the only other word is ain't, which is still considered illiterate, although in some English-speaking countries it is a perfectly good word, but here it's decidedly judged as ungrammatical.
They don't use it in the New York Times.
No. Now, some of these problems, too, occur with foreign base plurals. For instance, if people are talking about newspapers, broadcast stations, all the media that you can think about, they consider that as a group, and they will say the media doesn't give Obama a fair chance. Well, media is a plural word, the singular of that is medium. So you should have it would say the media don't give Obama a chance, but there are some of those foreign plurals that end up with causing true confusion. For instance, the word data is seen a lot and used a lot, meaning information that's gathered to prove one point or another or do some sort of study about, and people will very often say the data on this isn't very interesting, but it is a plural word, so you would say the data are not interesting, and but they just hear the word media so often, and once in a while you hear medium referring to a newspaper or a broadcast station, but not often.
Yeah.
So it's almost thought of as a singular word, but it isn't yet. So that is the rule for now. And there is a group that meets at Indiana University once a year that looks over possible changes in language, and then they have the power to rule whether whatever will be acceptable or not, and that is
Teachers have to keep up with that, I would think.
well, yes, and of course it's always, if you're in the writing era at all, it's always good to have a copy of the AP style book on hand, because there are some things that can be more than one way. For instance, the word advisor, because there are a lot of people working on your newspaper or your news service wherever you are, and you can't remember all the time, are we spelling advisor ER or OR? But if you have a style book, you put it in there, and even when I do a short job, such as somebody's, not will, I was going to say will, but somebody's article or something like that, or a long job like such as a book, I keep my own style book. I just make a place on my own computer that I put down whatever I've decided on. I did a number of physics books, and it's hard to remember if volume or velocity, or which one's a small v and which one's a capital V in a formula. So if you make a note, V followed, small v stands for one of these, and the cap V stands for the other, and that will help you out, so you don't have to look through the whole doggone book to see how you did it before. So if anybody that's doing anything of any size, I would say keep a style book of your own, and just to remember what you did before.
I asked you recently about Pepys, P-E-P-Y-S, his diary, and you said it was apostrophe after the S.
Well,
if
it's a plural
Pepys.
possessive, yeah.
And I put it in something I was writing that way, and my copy editor changed it. And I just decided I would let her have her little way. I wouldn't.
Well, she wanted a apostrophe S instead of just an apostrophe?
Yeah.
Well, maybe that's their style book. That's another thing that can be adjusted in different styles. For instance, if you're writing something lengthy, you have to put in your style book, am I abbreviating the longer months or am I spelling them out? What about a month with a date or a month without a date? All those things have to be decided, or you're just going to drive yourself totally crazy. And,
or the reader.
Oh, yeah. Well, some readers are, not paying too much attention if they can understand what you mean. Then another one I wanted to mention that's a very common mistake is people will say, this movie is very different from than that one. And I almost gave myself away there. And it is a convention that you should use from after different, not than. And so, because what you want is a...
Different than.
Yeah. But,
so from is correct.
From's correct, because you want a preposition. Than is more or less a subordinate conjunction. So that would be another one to do. And then, two words that people get mixed up regularly are further and farther. And sometimes you can make a little rule in your head that'll help you remember these things. But anyway, the Ford Motor Company, if anybody has seen their new ad on TV, they brag about how well the Fords are doing and so on, and then they, at the end of this about 30-second commercial, for which they paid plenty and are paying plenty to play it on things like the Super Bowl and so on, and they have the last two words are after they tell how well the car runs and goes anywhere and is low on mileage and so on, then it says go further. That's their last two words. And of course, if it's distance, you mean farther.
So they could say further, comma, it goes farther.
Yeah.
Is that right?
That'd be furthermore, wouldn't it? I think. Yeah. But no, they want just the 2 words. They want something peppy.
Yeah.
But
Well,
anyways, but somebody should be able to say, well, you shouldn't this be farther? If it's distance, it's farther. If it's something that if you want to be kind to your grandpa to be further your interest in his will, then that's further.
I hope you don't cost somebody their job. I assume they're not watching public access in Athens right now.
Well, they should be responsible for it. Then there are all sorts of unnecessary words people use. For instance, if you're going to use a preposition off, like get off the table, throw this off the ledge, or something like that. You don't need the of. You don't need off of or for any use. If you mean off, just say it. That one word that will do. And
Or clean the table.
pardon?
You wouldn't have to say clean off the table.
That's
You could
right.
say clean the table.
Oh well, that's a different usage. I'm referring to something that they're going to get from the table to elsewhere.
Okay.
So that's when you don't say off of, just say off.
Well, Drew kind of made me feel ashamed because I asked her about, I told her I got aggravated when I wanted to use the word hung and something I was reading said hanged.
Hang,
And she enlightened me, there's a big difference.
yeah. Well, of course, now that they've invented decapitation, maybe so many people aren't getting hanged, but it's definitely for a person being executed, it's hanged. Then even if they do it themselves as a matter of suicide, sometimes you'll hear on the news that he hung himself in his closet. It should always be hanged if it means a rope attached to the neck and a person done in that way, whether it's a punishment or suicide or what it is. But pictures can be hung. And
Oh, that shows my ignorance.
uh,
Well, how much are they teaching grammar in grammar schools these days?
well, it is named grammar school, but I think what everybody's accused of is teaching to the test. And of course, there are some grammar questions on the tests, I'm sure, but frankly, some of the teachers don't know the grammar well enough to really teach it in an interesting way. It can be very interesting if a person has a little imagination, but I'm afraid it's usually considered in the boring variety. So they don't teach it
Well,
as
they could
much.
use some of the time that they used to be using teaching how to write, handwriting.
Right, but that's right, because I guess they've given up cursive writing. But it's hard to teach grammar and keeping children's attention and so on, but it certainly is essential because you can be understood so much better. As a matter of fact, in my 2 terms at the Supreme Court,
She didn't serve on the Supreme
no,
Court.
just
She served
research.
the Supreme Court.
Yeah, just did research at the Supreme Court. But anyway, it seemed to me, and each argument is just 1 hour long. Each attorney gets a half hour, and that's it. And Justice Rehnquist in particular would just practically get a hook and drag the guy off the podium if he went over his half hour. So it's very important to be conservative of the time because you don't know how many justices are going to ask how many questions and how long they will take to answer. So an attorney must be very careful of his time. And now, how did this come up? Hope you gotta cut this part out.
I'm the one with the I get on here and,
Oh, yeah.
and I said for so long trying to find the word is my problem.
Yeah. I'm trying to think what example we were.
We were talking about handwriting.
Oh, I know about grammar in school. Okay. I've just observed that about a third of the attorney's time, very often, is trying to convince the justices what Congress meant by this law or that law. And then I even made a smart remark. One of my students here at Ohio University applied for an internship for a summer at Senator Teddy Kennedy's office. And they sent me a reference form to fill out. And I put a comment at the bottom, she's very good at expressing herself. Perhaps she could help write some of the laws because of this problem. And the person receiving that wrote back and said, some of that hazy language is left in there on purpose to give the judges more leeway.
Dear.
But anyway, I think good, clear writing is always to be sought. I wouldn't write in a muddled way just to make it quicker or
Vague.
or to evade an issue. I don't think that's very honest.
Drew, if you know, you must have a hypothesis why they are doing away with written language, with cursive.
Oh, I have not heard any official explanation about it. I think because typing used to be a big deal as a high school subject. Now a 5-year-old child knows how to type. So it's probably the same thing that they're acknowledging that people are going to be using their keyboards for everything, or with Siri talking into the machine and it'll do its, the work that we would have studied in grammar anyway. So
well, I hope they let them keep their signature, because they're going to need that for writing checks.
Maybe so, but
or writing wills.
I haven't heard any any discussion about it. But of course, the schools claim that their time is very crowded and they're trying to loosen up anything they can, in my opinion.
And they're trying to get ready for those tests.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
oh, boy.
That's the most important thing, because that not only reflects on how the school's doing, but it reflects on the teacher and can have something to do with his or her raise. And it's a very tough time to
I know
be in
that
there.
stress can really affect someone's mood,
Mm-hmm.
and I can't think those kids are having a real good time in class with the teacher who's worried about how they're going to do on a test so she can make money.
Yeah. Well, still, you do want a raise, and they have to go through that reply, which is arranged by name, and every teacher wants to get as much as she can, she or he.
Sure.
Well, now another bugaboo that we haven't discussed is absolute words. There are just a few of them, of which unique is probably the one that's the most misused. You'll hear people say this was very unique or quite unique or something like that. It's either unique or it's not. That means if it's unique, it's the only one on earth. And that's how strict it is. So you don't ever want to use a comparative or superlative form with unique. And another thing that goes in that category is dead. You can have before the actual death, a person can be almost dead or something like that, but after they're dead or they're not. It is, you can't be quite dead, very dead, anything like that. And then another one that you wouldn't think of ordinarily is all the geometric forms, because you can't be very round because it's either round or it's not. And the same with the square or rectangular. You just when you utter them, just don't put on any comparative or superlative forms.
Well, it seems like an exception might be when square is used as uptight.
Uptight? What? How? Oh.
Oh, he's a square.
Oh, I see. Yeah, well, no, I'm talking
Oh, he's
about...
a little square.
Yeah, I'm talking about geometric forms, though, of solid objects, I believe. I mean, I could see that when you say he's a square dealer, that doesn't mean it's geometric form.
I'm sorry.
Now, of course, the old bugaboos, lay and lie, are greatly misused, but it's pretty easy to remember. The present tense, rather, of lie is lie, and since it has the letter I in it, that makes it a little bit easier to remember. But it's in the
What
past.
is it to remember? Lie.
That's what a person does to himself. A lie never has a direct object. You just, I lie down. Yesterday I lay here. That's the hard one because the past tense of lie is the same as present tense of lay, and same pronounced and spelled the same way.
Oh, I hadn't realized that.
Lie, lay, lain, L-A-I-N. So those are the ones that don't have any direct objects. They just have the subject and the verb, and so that's word should be carefully chosen because it's the one with no object, and so it has to be just concerned what the subject is doing. And then, but the word lay would have an object, such as I lay the book on the table. The book has been laid on the table before. The book has laid on this table, been laid on this table every day. But when you say that, of course, the book itself lies on the table. So people get their lays and lies mixed up all the time. But anyway, you definitely don't say, I want to lay down here and take a nap, because that's the past tense of lie. You could say, I lay here and took a nap yesterday, something like that.
Okay, I'm afraid that our public is going to be judgmental now from when Jane and I talk, and they know the rules now. They're going to be watching us for how we speak.
Yeah.
And so, was there another one you wanted to mention?
Well, a mistake that you hear very often is how what we call internal plurals are made. If you go to a family gathering and both your whole family and from each side is there, it is mothers-in-law, not mother-in-laws that are there. It's because this is called internal pluralization, and the same is true of some titles. For instance, Attorney General. We have had many attorneys general in the United States. It's not attorney generals.
Now, mothers-in-law, would those be hyphenated?
Yes, and brothers-in-law and sisters-in-law, all same. And so, are we done, or do you want?
Are we done? Maybe we're done.
And I said that we weren't going to happily wave goodbye unless you objected at the end.
Mm.
So I don't know how you feel about it.
Well, I'm willing to do my bit if it does any good to help, solve this horrible crisis. And one of the things that I'm upset about this ISIS business is the last guy who was talking about beheading someone seemed to be an American. Have you seen that? Mm-hmm. The British guy is gone now. They figured out who he was, so he's disappeared. So now there's a guy who appears to be American. It might be Canadian, but appears, when I listen to his voice, he sounds American. And that horrified me beyond all. I don't know why I was more horrified that there was an American talking about beheading somebody than I would have been if the guy were British or German or, you know, any other nationality, but it did. So, I think this is I don't know, worldwide. This is not just in the Middle East. This is everywhere. You know, these guys are in Indonesia. I mean, they're everywhere. So, I don't know what there is that we can do to stop it. I don't think there's anything we can do to stop it. I really don't. I'm very pessimistic. How about you?
Oh, yes, yes. I hate to leave it with that, with pessimism. I think some of what precipitated it was some of the United States policies and actions after
Yes.
9/11.
Well, if
But we
had,
can't go back now.
that's right, had we never invaded and Saddam Hussein were still there, you know, or whoever it would be, maybe they would have
Yeah.
deposed him by now. But we stirred up hornet's nests, there's no question. And then we went to Afghanistan and stirred up another one. So yes, I think we have mistakenly entered into a situation that we didn't really understand. And these are long standing. Remember, I don't know if you heard this, but I listened to this guy on CNN talk, one of the ISIS rebel guys, and he called us crusaders. Now, how long has it been since the Crusades? 1,000 years. But he called us crusaders. So the fact that we invaded that part of the world, well, I mean, you know, Europeans, let's just say, invaded that part of the world 1,000 years ago. They still haven't forgotten that. So, what can we do? The only thing we can do is stay out of there completely, contain it, say, okay, here's the boundaries, you guys stay in there, fight, do whatever you're going to do.
We don't know that we can contain it.
No, not really. But
not any more than Ebola.
yeah, I know. That's the problem. It is like Ebola. It's very like Ebola. It's like a disease, and it's spreading. Americans are catching it, you know. And Brits and people from all over the world are I don't know about the Chinese. I haven't heard of any Chinese ones, but there could be.
What really appalled me was when those 200 schoolgirls were kidnapped, and that guy stood there and said, we're going to kill women.
Yeah, oh yeah.
I just
Well, how about when he said, we're going to sell these girls as wives? Sell a girl? Excuse me? I think in the 21st century, selling a girl should be something that should happen nowhere on the planet.
Well, they're not in the 21st century.
No, they're not, but
They're
what do you do about this? So, and if we don't do something, then there's this huge refugee crisis, you know, that arises. These people, usually the women and children, flee and they have to go somewhere and they're in a refugee camp, and if somebody goes to help them, then those are the people that get kidnapped.
And Australia is sending them all away.
Yeah, and those are the people that get kidnapped because they go over there and try to help. These crazy guys don't even want us to come near and help anybody. So, you know.
I know that Athens doesn't want to hear this on their jolly public access, and we have 1 minute left, and so I guess we better, maybe we can not smile too much, but give a little way.
Well, I have this to say about that.
He said 1 minute. So.
Well, I have this to say about that. Maybe we can find a way, an organization that we can promote and donate to. Medicine, what is it, Doctors Without Frontiers or something. That's about the only thing I know of that we could do positively. So we're going to think about that, Athens. More on this next week. And goodbye. Have a wonderful week.
Be kind.